Barry Ashbee's journey to the NHL was one of perseverance, pain, and sheer determination. Unlike many hockey greats, his rise wasn't marked by early stardom, but by years of grinding in the minor leagues, battling injuries, and proving his worth against all odds. When he finally reached the NHL at 31, he quickly became a cornerstone of the Philadelphia Flyers' defense. But just as he was at the peak of his career, tragedy struck, ending his playing days in an instant. And if that wasn't enough, an even greater battle awaited him just a few years later. This is the heartbreaking story of Barry Ashbee. The long and painful road to the NHL, the horrific tragedies that ended it all, and the lasting legacy he left behind. Born in Western Ontario on July 28, 1939, William Barry Ashbee didn't have the kind of junior career that screamed NHL prospect. He played for the OEJ's Barrie Flyers, where he was solid but unremarkable, a hard-working defenseman without standout speed. He began his professional career far from the big leagues in the Eastern Professional Hockey League, EPHL, with the Kingston Frontenacs. For 3 seasons, he toiled in the minors, gradually developing his game. His break came in 1962-63 when he was acquired by the AHL's Hershey Bears. At the time, Hershey was one of the strongest teams outside the NHL, and Ashbee found himself in good company, teaming up with Larry "The Rock" Zeidel and Dale Rolfe to form a formidable defensive unit. He quickly established himself as one of the AHL's top defensemen, earning recognition for his toughness and steady play. His strong performance in Hershey didn't go unnoticed. After a stellar 1962-63 season, the Boston Bruins came calling, offering him a contract and telling him they saw him as a key piece of their future. But this was the original 6 era of the NHL, a time when roster spots were scarce and only the absolute best cracked the lineup. Ashbee remained in the shadows, waiting for his chance. That opportunity finally came in November 1965 when injuries depleted the Bruins' defense. He was recalled and paired with Eddie Westfall for 14 games. It should have been his long-awaited breakthrough, but something was terribly wrong. Doctors soon discovered that Ashbee had been playing with a crushed disc in his back. He had been battling through excruciating pain, struggling to move, much less play at the highest level. His shot at the NHL had arrived, but his body was already betraying him. Barry Ashbee underwent back surgery and spent 6 weeks in the hospital, uncertain if he would ever walk again, let alone play hockey. The injury forced him to miss the rest of the 1965-66 season and the entire 1966-67 campaign. During his recovery, Boston Bruins coach Harry Sinden questioned his toughness, accusing him of exaggerating his condition to avoid playing. Rather than supporting Ashbee through his rehabilitation, the organization cast him aside. He was sent back to Hershey, never suiting up for the Bruins again. Years later, Sinden admitted that he had been wrong, but the damage had been done. Ashbee never forgot the attack on his character. Given his uncertain status, it wasn't surprising that Ashbee was overlooked in the 1967 NHL expansion draft. The NHL had just doubled in size, adding 6 new teams, including the Philadelphia Flyers, but none of them were willing to take a chance on a 28-year-old defenseman coming off a serious injury. With no NHL opportunities, Ashbee remained in the AHL, playing 3 more seasons. Though he was still better than many defensemen in the NHL, he had been labeled a career minor leaguer, a player no team saw as a long-term investment. Still, Flyers general manager Keith Allen and head coach Vic Stasiak had heard enough about Ashbee's reputation to give him a shot. In 1970, they acquired him in a trade with Boston for young prospect Darryl Edistrand. At 31 years old, after a decade spent grinding away in the minors, Ashbee was finally getting a second chance at the NHL. When he arrived at the Flyers training camp before the 1970-71 season, Ashbee had something to prove. Years of being overlooked and underestimated had left him with a massive chip on his shoulder. Legendary Flyers announcer Gene Hart recalled that his first impression of Ashbee was that of a loner, someone who carried the weight of past disappointments. He seemed distrustful of his coaches and rarely smiled. His scowl had become a permanent fixture, the mark of a man who had spent too long being told he wasn't good enough. But Ashbee was ready to fight for his place in the NHL. and he had no intention of letting this opportunity slip away. Barry Ashbee had a strong training camp and quickly earned his place on the Flyers' blue line. Not only did he make the team, but he became a key figure on defense almost immediately. As the only right-handed shot among the Flyers' defensemen, he was given a prominent role on the power play, playing the point and providing an additional offensive threat. When Fred Shero replaced Vic Stasiak as head coach in 1971-72, he quickly recognized Ashbee's value. The hard-nosed veteran, with years of grinding in the minors, had a mentality that fit perfectly with the Flyers' evolving identity. It didn't take long for Ashbee to gain respect throughout the NHL. Never one to back down from a challenge, Ashbee was known for his fierce competitiveness, but sometimes his intensity got the best of him. One night in Pittsburgh, he let his emotions boil over and landed a right hook to referee Brian Lewis's jaw. The league wasted no time disciplining him, handing down an 8-game suspension and a $150 fine. But, if anything, incidents like these only reinforced his reputation as an old-school, tough-as-nails defenseman. By 1972, however, his body was paying the price for years of relentless play. His left knee was in such bad shape that his kneecap was deteriorating and the ligaments were barely holding together. The pain didn't stop there. He also battled constant agony in his neck, shoulder, and elbow, yet he refused to complain or let it slow him down. "Barry Ashbee was the strongest guy mentally I've ever seen," said Bobby Clarke, a sentiment echoed by many of his Flyers teammates. Hockey players are known for their toughness, but even in a locker room full of hardened warriors, Ashbee's resilience stood out. Despite his growing reputation and the respect he commanded, Ashbee nearly walked away from the game. During training camp before the 1972-73 season, he became frustrated by what he saw as a lack of urgency from some of his teammates. Coming off a disappointing season, he expected a higher level of commitment, but instead, he saw complacency. Disgusted, he went to Flyers GM Keith Allen and bluntly stated that he was too old to waste his time with a team content with losing. He gave Allen an ultimatum: trade him or he would retire. This no-nonsense approach was classic Ashbee. He had fought too hard to get to the NHL to be part of a team that wasn't willing to give everything it had. But what Ashbee didn't realize at the time was that the Flyers were on the brink of something special. His leadership and toughness would soon help shape the identity of a team that was about to make history. Barry Ashbee's frustration with the Flyers quickly faded when he saw that the team had finally built a roster filled with players who matched his intensity, toughness, and relentless drive to win. He was no longer part of a group that was simply trying to survive in the NHL. He was now surrounded by warriors who were ready to fight for something bigger. The defensive unit, led by Ashbee, Jim Watson, Joe Watson, Andre Dupont, and Ed Van Impe, became one of the most formidable in the league. They were gritty, disciplined, and fearless, creating a blue line that was difficult to penetrate. Meanwhile, the young offensive core, led by Bobby Clarke, Bill Barber, and Rick McLeish, injected energy and scoring prowess into the lineup. This balance between rugged defense and dynamic offense transformed the Flyers into a legitimate contender. They finished the season second in the Western Division and made a deep run in the Stanley Cup playoffs, reaching the semifinals, their best finish yet. Sensing that the team was on the brink of something special, Flyers management made a move that would cement their championship aspirations. In the offseason, they brought back legendary goaltender Bernie Parent, reuniting him with the franchise he had briefly left. His return gave the Flyers the last piece of the puzzle, an elite netminder who could win them a championship. The 1973-74 season proved to be Ashbee's finest. He was a rock on the blue line, playing with an unshakable sense of responsibility. His steady presence gave the team confidence, and his ability to shut down opponents made life easier for his teammates. But, despite his incredible performance, when the mid-season Western Division All-Star team was announced, Ashbee was nowhere to be found. The omission stung. Frustrated but undeterred, he responded the only way he knew how, by playing even harder. He made sure his absence from the All-Star lineup was a mistake the league would regret. By the end of the season, Ashbee had put together one of the most dominant defensive campaigns of his career. He finished with an astounding +52 ± rating, the best on the Flyers and one of the highest in the entire NHL. His outstanding play earned him the postseason recognition He was named a second-team NHL All-Star by The Week and selected for the All-Western Conference team by the Hockey News. However, for Ashbee, personal accolades meant little. He had spent his entire career fighting for respect, but his ultimate goal was never about individual awards. He wanted the one thing that mattered most in hockey, the Stanley Cup. And in 1974, after years of grinding through the minors, battling injuries, and proving his worth, he would finally get his chance to lift the ultimate prize. Barry Ashbee's performance during the 1973-74 season was remarkable, not just because of his skill, but because of what he endured to stay on the ice. He played through excruciating pain, battling a chipped vertebra, bursitis in his elbow, and a pinched nerve in his neck that was so severe he had to wear a protective horse collar. His left side was often so numb that gripping his stick became a struggle, and on some nights, even bending over to tie his skates was nearly impossible. Yet, despite his physical limitations, he remained a steady force on the Flyers' blue line, as reliable as ever. His toughness was on full display in the first round of the playoffs, where he helped lead the Flyers to a dominant sweep over the Atlanta Flames. In the semifinals against the New York Rangers, he continued to be a pillar of strength, playing a key role as Philadelphia took a 2-1 series lead. But everything changed in Game 4, a grueling overtime battle that would not only shift the momentum of the series, but also end Ashbee's career in an instant. The game was tied, and the Flyers were locked in a tense battle when, at 1:27 of overtime, disaster struck. As New York's Dale Rolfe fired a rising shot toward the net, Ashbee was in the wrong place at the worst possible time. The puck struck him directly in the face, just above the right eye. The scene was horrifying. Ashbee collapsed to the ice in visible agony as Flyers trainer Frank Lewis and medical staff rushed to his side. The broadcast captured the chaos unfolding. Face off to the right of Bernie Parent, Bobby Clark and Stemkowski gets it. Draw. That hit Barry Ashbee. A shot by? Ashbee is down and hurt. Ashbee was hit right in the face with a shot by Dale Rolfe. He is in great pain down there, and they're coming out quickly with trainer Frank Lewis and calling for the doctor to come out. A high-rising shot by Rolfe caught Barry Ashbee right in the face. We're going downstairs, down to Brian McFarland, who was right out there on the ice after the linesman, and Barry Ashbee was hit just on the eyelid, just above the right eye. It is a bad gash according to the officials. Matt, you were there? Could you describe it? The injury was severe, far worse than just a cut. In that one moment, Ashbee's career came to a devastating and abrupt end. The Flyers, on the brink of their first Stanley Cup final, had just lost one of their most reliable defensemen in the cruelest way imaginable. The puck struck Barry Ashbee with brutal force just above his right eyelid, between the eyelid and eyebrow. As blood streamed down his face, medical staff rushed onto the ice. Trainers moved quickly, helping to stabilize him, while he pressed both hands over the deep wound. The gravity of the injury was immediately apparent. Broadcasters scrambled to update fans as they watched in stunned silence. There's a lot of blood, and they move quickly to get Barry Ashbee off the ice on this stretcher. He's holding both hands over the wound, so the injury again is just above the right eye, a bad cut, and that's the story right down here at ice level. The scene was chaotic. Teammates stood frozen, knowing that a facial injury of this magnitude could be career-ending. Opposing players looked on in concern, realizing that this was far beyond a typical hockey wound. Ashbee was rushed to a hospital in New York, where doctors worked to assess the full extent of the damage. The news was devastating. Excessive hemorrhaging had permanently scarred his retina, leaving him partially blind in his right eye. Just like that, his hockey career was over. For a player who had spent a decade fighting to make it to the NHL, this was a cruel twist of fate. He had overcome countless obstacles, injuries, setbacks, and years in the minors, only to have his time on the ice cut short in an instant. But Ashbee, ever the competitor, refused to let his spirit break. Instead of dwelling on what had been taken from him, he focused on what his team was still fighting for: the Stanley Cup. Unable to play, Ashbee watched from the sidelines as the Flyers pushed forward without him. They battled through a grueling 7-game series against the New York Rangers, showing the resilience and grit that had come to define their identity. Then, they faced Bobby Orr and the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup final, a matchup that would test every ounce of their strength. When the final buzzer sounded, history had been made. The Flyers had won their first ever Stanley Cup, cementing their place as champions. Though Ashbee couldn't be on the ice for the moment he had worked his entire career for, his name was engraved on the Stanley Cup, ensuring his legacy would never be forgotten. At the championship celebration, Ashbee arrived wearing dark glasses to shield his injured eye, but nothing could hide his emotions. He addressed his teammates with a heartfelt message. "Boys, cherish this group. There'll never be another one like it." To the press, he made sure they didn't portray him as a victim. His perspective was one of gratitude, not regret. "Don't write me up as a tragic figure. Right now, I'm the happiest man alive. Some people strive for 60 years and never make it. I got what I wanted when I was 34. His playing career had come to an end far too soon, but Barry Ashbee had already secured something greater: the respect of his teammates, the admiration of the hockey world, and a place in history as a Stanley Cup champion. With his playing days behind him, Barry Ashbee initially planned to step away from hockey entirely. He intended to move back to Toronto, find a new career path, and spend more time with his family. He also had an investment in a professional lacrosse franchise, which seemed like the perfect next chapter. But the Flyers had other ideas. Throughout the summer of 1974, the organization persistently approached Ashbee, urging him to take on a role as an assistant coach under Fred Sherrow. At first he refused, worried that the offer was merely a gesture of sympathy rather than a legitimate coaching opportunity. However, Sherrow, who had already revolutionized the NHL by becoming the first coach to introduce an official assistant, Ashbee's former Hershey teammate Mike Nicoluk, assured him otherwise. With backing from Keith Allen and Bobby Clarke, Ashbee was convinced that his experience and leadership were genuinely valued. Finally, in August 1974, he accepted the position and joined the Flyers staff, focusing primarily on developing the team's defensemen. Though initially hesitant, Ashbee quickly found his footing behind the bench. He grew to love the role, embracing the chance to mentor younger players and contribute to the team's ongoing success. To further honor his legacy, the Flyers established a new tradition: season-ending team awards. The trophy for the Flyers' top defenseman was named the Barry Ashbee Trophy, ensuring his contributions to the team would never be forgotten. Despite accepting the coaching position, Ashbee remained firm about one thing: he did not want a personal tribute night dedicated to his playing career. He had never been one to seek attention or accolades. However, in April 1975, after much persuasion, he reluctantly agreed to an official Barry Ashbee night at the Spectrum. With his wife Donna and their children standing by his side, he was showered with praise, celebrated for his grit, leadership, and unwavering dedication to the game. The evening's biggest surprise, however, came from the Flyers players themselves. Wanting to show their appreciation in a meaningful way, they had secretly pooled their money together to buy Ashbee a brand new camper, something he had always wanted. Overwhelmed, Ashbee graciously accepted the gift, further cementing the deep respect and admiration his teammates had for him. That season, Ashbee was behind the bench as the Flyers secured their second consecutive Stanley Cup in 1975 and made a third straight appearance in the Stanley Cup Final in 1976. His future as a coach looked bright. In February 1977, he even took part in the first Flyers Wives Fight for Lives Carnival, a charity event that would later become a cornerstone of the team's community outreach. What Ashbee didn't realize at the time was that this event would soon take on a deeply personal significance. His own life was about to take a tragic turn, one that would test his strength in a way no hockey game ever could. In April 1977, just as the Philadelphia Flyers were preparing to face the Toronto Maple Leafs in the first round of the playoffs, the team was blindsided by devastating news. Barry Ashbee had been diagnosed with leukemia. True to his character, he faced the situation with quiet strength, refusing to let his illness become a distraction. Addressing the team, he insisted, "I don't want this to turn into a win one for the Gippers situation. You'll win, I'll get better, and that's it." Even from his hospital bed, Ashbee remained deeply involved with the team, staying in daily contact with the Flyers' defensemen, offering advice and encouragement. His teammates fought hard in his honor, rallying back after falling into an 0-2 series deficit against Toronto to win the first round. But while the Flyers were able to battle their way forward, Ashbee's condition worsened. His chemotherapy treatments failed, and the cancer spread to his kidneys. Still, he refused to surrender to the disease, fighting with the same grit that had defined his playing career. On the final night of his life, he turned to his wife, Donna, and reassured her, "I'm tired now, but I'll whip this thing in the morning." Tragically, he never woke up. Barry Ashbee passed away on May 12, 1977, at just 37 years old. His funeral was held in Toronto, and days later, a public memorial was held at the Spectrum in Philadelphia. Flyers owner Ed Snyder and the organization ensured that Ashbee's legacy would never be forgotten. The team retired his number, 4 jersey, raising it to the rafters where it would hang alongside the franchise's greatest legends. The following season, the Flyers wore number, 4 patches on their jerseys in his honor. His impact extended beyond the rink. The Flyers' Wives Fight for Lives. Carnival was officially dedicated to his memory, with a significant portion of the proceeds supporting leukemia, research, and treatment, ensuring that others battling blood diseases had a fighting chance. Donna Ashbee and their children remain deeply connected to the Flyers family long after his passing, a testament to the bond Ashbee had forged with the organization. Sadly, Donna passed away in 2021 at the age of 82, joining Barry after more than 4 decades without him. Barry Ashbee's name may not be on the all-time scoring lists, but his impact on the game of hockey is undeniable. He embodied the spirit of resilience, toughness, and leadership, qualities that continue to define the Philadelphia Flyers to this day. Though his life and career were cut tragically short, his legacy lives on in the rafters, in the Barry Ashbee Trophy, and in the Flyers' Wives Carnival, which continues to raise funds for leukemia research in his honor. His story is a testament to perseverance in the face of adversity and the unbreakable will of a true warrior. What are your thoughts on Barry Ashbee's incredible yet heartbreaking journey? Let us know in the comments, and if you love deep dives into the lives of hockey legends, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out more stories of the players who shaped the game.